Hello and welcome to this actually special announcement for my company, which is called Aurate. And my name's Jacqueline Norton. I'm the CEO and founder of Aurate. And I'm very delighted to welcome my friend and colleague, Conrad Simpson.
Hey, Jacqueline, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world.
How are you?
I am fantastic, Jacqueline. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really excited. So the reason we're having this chat is, I normally do expert spotlights with various people and generally, in the music industry. Well, this is an expert spotlight on ourselves.
Wow, thank you. And I'm very flattered to be called an expert. Thank you.
Well, we're all experts in something.
We are. We are.
So I think, what we wanted to do was kind of give a bit of background into Aurate and what we've been planning for quite a while now, and just explain a little bit more about that, because we've made an announcement this morning that our doors are open. We've arrived, and now I think the real fun bit for me, because you and I have got a background in sales, we'll talk about that in a minute, and the fun bit is selling it and sharing with people what it is that we're doing and why. So before we kind of go into that, do you want to give us a bit of an intro on you, Conrad?
Yes, so I'll give you a 1 minute spotlight on me and my background. So I'm a seller by profession. I've been in the B2B sales world for, I guess, coming up 25, 30 years now. And I worked with Jacqueline some time ago, but we worked together for about 5 years back at the start of our careers. And since then, I've stayed on the track of selling, and in fact, more recently been involved in sales transformation. So actually helping and coaching sales leaders and CROs in terms of getting the best from their teams. And I recently reconnected with Jacqueline, probably 2.5, nearly 3 years ago now. We started to talk about where there might be gaps in people's strategies. And one of the things that I think jumped out for both of us was the fact that there's lots more technology around to help the seller nowadays, and that's all very good. Having a framework and methodology and those things are very, very helpful. But we have, I think, neglected the human bit. Today, to get a sales job, you have to do 5 or more interviews. We spend a lot of time finding the right people, but then once they're part of our team, we don't necessarily tend to focus too much on developing their competencies and skills. And that was the thing that really excited me about our conversations, Jack. And of course, here we are, sometime down the road with what we think is going to help those guys massively.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like you say, we met when we were on the same sales team many years ago, and our careers have gone slightly in different directions. So I, went on to sell for other companies and eventually became a sales director of a small software company. And then I joined Deloitte 7 and a bit years ago and left them in March to focus on this. And while I was there, and, people who know me know my health journey has been a big factor in this, I started to have coaching myself. And it was so transformational for me. And in fact, I partly credit that with saving my life from having breast cancer twice. Doing a lot of inner work really was transformational for me, along with obviously lots of medical treatments and alternative treatments that I went through. But it really showed me what a difference it makes to focus on, what I needed and what I'd actually not been giving myself for a long time, which was that kind of nourishment of my brain, heart, soul, being that I really needed. And I think we all do, because we're all human, right? So that set me off down a different journey. And through my working with Deloitte, basically coaching as a sales, as a campaign strategist, winning bids for the audit team and business, that showed me, what a difference it makes in the selling. It kind of came full circle for me. So when we started talking, I think we both recognized there was something there in terms of, a gap in the market, certainly in the technology stack, which, I think if we termed it human technology, that wouldn't be far off the truth.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think when we think about the organic bit of the equation, the seller, which is, as I said before, it's your most expensive resource if you're a sales leader or an executive taking your product to market. In the B2B world, these guys get paid fantastic salaries and huge commission plans. It's a very, very big investment. So you want to make sure that those people are as competent as they can be and as effective and as happy as they can be, because the last thing you want is an unhappy seller. And I think one of the things that we've probably done over the intervening years since we were selling together in the 90s is that we've focused on quite a lot on consumptive training. You consume the training and then you go back to the day job when the training course is over. And I think very much that there's an opportunity, and certainly I think initially a need, because we see this from people that we've talked to change that consumptive model into a much longer term competency model. So to check in and make sure that people are competent. And I always use the analogy of an airline pilot. When you learn to fly a 747 or whatever airplane you want to fly, of course you're competent because you get the certificates, but they make sure that you keep that competence by taking you back into the simulator. And I like to think of what Aurate is doing is very much like that, to make sure that investment you've made in selling is absolutely as competent as it can be, because it is as critical as flying a plane for me,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we, for me, I've always thought of selling as being something that should be one of the most noble things you can do in business. You're solving problems for people, and yet selling has got a bad reputation through probably some outdated sales let's say practices and methodologies that we're probably more on the manipulation side of things. And I don't think there's any secret in that. That's no big reveal, right? But the people who we are and know are decent, honest people who want to solve people's problems. And there is a real kind of misalignment there of our actual values, and yet some of the things we're encouraged to do which feel out of place. And the ability to align all those things together to be something that really raises our game in terms of behaviors. But there's that old adage, isn't there, that people buy from people. And I would add to that people buy from people that can help them. It helps if you like them, but it's not absolutely necessary.
Yes,
but it's lovely if it works that way.
Yeah.
But to solve someone's problem, get them out of discomfort, pain, to really be there and help them is a wonderful thing to be able to do. So the ability to, I think, be constantly vigilant in how we show up in the moment is again, like you say, it's an awareness thing, it's a competency thing. It's something that you can't just go as an airline pilot, I did all the exams, I've had all the training.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't want to get on that plane for sure. Exactly. And I agree with you. And I think there's been a catalyst for me has been the fact that there's been this change in balance. When you talk about perhaps some of those sales practices that a lot of us will have witnessed back in those early days of tech sales, that was where I saw it. The balance of power was definitely in favor with the seller. The customer was certainly not as well informed as they are nowadays. And you'll see lots of studies and commentary about how informed sellers are today. So now that the sellers have redressed that balance and they are more well informed, it means that sellers do have to be much better. They do have to be much better because that they are working with a customer who's no longer naively ignorant of lots of the relevant things. And so I think it's meaning that people are having to show up, as you say, in the right way, in that moment. And of course, customers recognize when you're being authentic and noble, and they recognize it when you're not being authentic and noble. And we've all seen examples of that in our sales careers. And I think, that's why I think it's important to find out from you in more detail, what Aurate's focusing on. And I've seen you sharing content, and we've shared content around three things: results, reputation, and relationship. And hopefully we'll get to talk about how they fit into what Aurate does. What Aurate does in terms of helping customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's about understanding, certainly from a sales leader's point of view, what their drivers are, what the the challenges they face and how they can support their teams
Mm.
in being a better coach, as well as a boss, as a manager, as a sales leader, and those two things are quite tricky to navigate. And I think two of the major challenges are that sales leaders they struggle having the time to do that.
Yeah.
And they also are not coaches.
Right.
And there is a dynamic that goes on with people when you are in a coaching relationship. The coachee has to give permission to be coached.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very vulnerable place to be. And if that person who's coaching you is also your boss, that can be quite difficult, for both parties. So I think the way to structure that competency journey is in understanding those dynamics, understanding and setting up the right boundaries around it, but also providing content that is experiential, that, like you said, it's not just about, I did that course, I've got that knowledge.
Mm.
But for me, knowledge is operating on at least two levels. There's head knowledge, where we just understand the concept of something. But then there's the deeper embodied knowledge of how we behave. And for me, the way we behave is about what are our habits, what are our how we show up with our awareness of things, how emotionally intelligent we are, how we understand the human dynamics of every conversation, whether it's with our boss, our leader, our colleagues, and really critically with our potential customers and clients. So the ability to support the sales leader with something that they can implement that supports them in having those conversations, but also with the team in understanding that dynamic and what's really going on there, that there's, a supportive container, if you like, that is set up around those conversations is really what, we're attempting to provide to people. And I think we've created something that's really delivering on that. It's really exciting that there's something that fills that gap. And I think you and I have shared many times, just how we recognize that people get that, they recognize it,
mm-hmm.
but not many people are actually solving it. They are aware of the need, but there's not really a lot of solutions around that, competency journey and the structure,
mm-hmm.
apart from either more sales training or hiring a coach that isn't you. And I think the trust that needs to be built with the leader and the team is a critical dynamic in helping sellers to show up with their clients and prospects in a way that is going to help them do more business.
Yes, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. And the point you make there about coaching is I think, a significant component of what Aurate talks to. And for me, that's about making sure that you've got what you need in place to change the behaviors, because you can't afford, as you say, as a sales leader, to coach every deal and coach everybody all day, because you've got to do other things, But if you're able to help people change their habits, and that's difficult to do, in my life in the sales transformation business, we were often sharing a statistic that something like 90% of what you learn in a consumptive training model or training course is lost after just 60 days. So it's you spend a lot of money buying a consumptive training course, and everybody goes back to doing what they did before. The investment's wasted, and you've wasted that time, and everybody goes back to doing what they want. So finding a way, and we should talk to this as well, finding a way to make sure that that's in the salesperson and the sales leader's daily life is also important, and getting to the point where it becomes habitual, because I think they say 90 days is what you need to develop a habit, but I think they also say that you need 10,000 hours to be an expert in something.
The opinions vary.
Right.
Opinions vary on this point, yeah.
So having something that will help you change your habits for the better for you as a seller is going to be a good thing, particularly if it's, it involves your team and you're growing and learning as a team and moving forward, the competency of the whole revenue organization. So, I agree with your points there. So do we want to talk a little bit about those three areas that I mentioned? So
Yeah. So just before we do that, I want to pick up on that point though, because you're right. I mean, there is that thing, use it or lose it. And um, there is one thing I think that's made it in the too difficult camp to be able to address this, and that is another old adage: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And the thing is that when you are working with humans, it's hard to manage what can be seen as a kind of fluffy topic. It's kind of that human stuff. Everybody's different. How do you deal with that? Yeah. And the important thing is there to be able to measure it. And so one of the things that we focused on a lot in what we've built into our solution is the ability to have data analytics around behavior change.
Wow.
And when you are able to measure it, you actually get not just a return on investment, which of course every spend needs, but you get return on impact. Yeah. And that is the difference. That's the game changer, is that we have made changes, the team have made changes, and we've invested, but we can now understand, measure what the change means. And so when you come to look at that and then compare it to the change in results, that should give you a really great picture about how well that's going and what else needs to be done to accelerate those behavior changes that are needed.
Yeah, and I think if you could do that in a collaborative way across teams and groups of people, it does two things. I think it helps you create a safe environment.
Yeah.
Because people grow much more effectively in a safe environment where it's okay, to be, who and how they are. But also to be able, as you say, to be able to measure that progress as well, so that you're seeing as a seller how you're developing, rather than being tested after 2 days in the classroom and then going back to, what you used to do the week before, because that's what everybody does. So yeah, big differences there, and definitely something that is going to take sales leaders and sellers, into a space where they need to be honest with each other. They need to be clear and they need to be transparent. I think that's one of the things that I've certainly experienced in my sales career historically, was that very often it felt as a seller that you were playing a role, the role that your boss wanted you to play, rather than actually being yourself. And of course, we know now that, post-COVID, of course, we all have permission to be ourselves now, which is a fantastic thing.
It's been a real interesting dynamic, hasn't it? And the concept for this, I mean, if we hark back to our original conversation, it's nearly 3 years ago now. And we called that conversation the epic conversation, right? Because it was a 4-hour catch up, right?
Yes.
And it was, and I think that's kind of encapsulated the impact on both of us of the possibilities that are here to make positive change and impact. And if you think about, you talked about the 3 themes that we've got in terms of the key outcomes, results, reputation, and relationships. They are 3 of our critical outcomes, and we've built a whole framework around that in terms of how we deliver it. And when you think about results, of course, you need measurable results. You need not just the human kind of behavior change, but you need to see that in your numbers, because that's what every sales leader and every seller is measured against, is how you're doing against your number and against your target. But also, it's results in terms of reputation that leads on to reputation with your customers and your clients. The people who, do they want to do business with you, or are you a necessary evil? When they get a better choice, will they leave? Or, are you just having transactional relationships with your customers, or are you building a real solid foundation for that? And that affects everything. Those relationships, that leads on to the relationships piece, which is the relationship between the sales leader, the way the sales leader is, makes a real impact on the way the sellers feel, and the way the sellers feel when they go have conversations makes a real yes or no decision and difference to the way the prospect feels. So, the way we show up, there is a culture, there's a tone, there is a way people feel, which we know is a major, factor. And that's what we're addressing, really, is that how do you make people feel? And are you aware of that? And
yes.
the decision about whether people say yes or no. So we have that stat, and it's in our on our webpage, which has got a little video with a lot of the stats in that we have really focused on. That 62% of all first sales meetings don't progress to a second, and that's a huge amount of time. And the thing is that a seller can walk out of a conversation and think that was a great meeting, and a prospect may very well not feel that way.
Well, I've been in some of those meetings, Jack.
We all have, right? we just, I mean, there is a perception change, right? A difference. Yeah. And there's another stat that says, and all the source material is in the video, by the way, but there is another one that 2/3 of sellers believe they deliver a great service, and buyers think it's at least a third lower than that. So there's a real mismatch in the way that perceptions are, and the ability to close that gap and really understand, what's happening in the buyer's mind, rather, when they, at some point there will be a moment,
yes,
where we talk about that silence, when the penny drops, or they make a decision that they're not going to go any further. But everybody wants to be nice, right? They don't necessarily want to tell you that. So the ability to understand what's not being said, what's being felt.
Yes.
If all you're doing is thinking about your script or your sales patter, or the things that you're going to say next, you miss out on those cues.
Yes, and of course, sometimes it's not the right time for a sales pitch. Yeah. Sometimes you should wait and pick your moment. And I absolutely agree with you. I mean, again, having been around sellers for as long as I have, very often two sellers will leave the same meeting with a customer and come up with two totally different perceptions of that same meeting. And equally, you'll meet a seller who says, "Oh, we just clicked."
Yeah.
But if you ask them, well, why was it that you just clicked? They wouldn't be able to tell you why they were able to, found a very strong relationship very quickly with that customer. So those are some of the areas that I know you focused on when you were thinking about how to help people with transformation. So results and reputation, and of course relationships, are massively important to selling. And we've talked about the past in terms of where we've come from. But why do you think now was the right time, Jack? I mean, is it just purely a coincidence? Has COVID made a huge difference, do you think? Or is it just that perhaps people are wanting, including customers, are wanting a different approach to B2B selling? Do you have a view of what were the critical catalysts, if you like?
Yeah, so I do, in that I think we've always needed this because we've always been human.
Right.
And COVID has accelerated it for sure. And the fact that people now feel they have permission to be more relaxed, be more authentic, be more real, and show up as their whole self, and not, like you said before, putting your sales hat on, right, when you just you put on the shiny suit of behaviors, which, never really sat well with me, but not that I don't like suits, but you know what I mean? We're a lot more relaxed now. It's nice to be a bit more ourselves, a bit more comfortable, maybe, a
bit more authentically ourselves, because you're right. For a lot of us sellers in that old world of white shirts and dark grey or dark blue suits, they were very much like a costume, almost as an actor would put on a costume to play a role.
Yeah.
And I think often, customers saw right through that,
And where did most business get done, right? It was either in the pub afterwards when you stopped being the seller, or on the golf course, where women really weren't always allowed, right, or somewhere else, where you're being yourself.
Yes.
So yes, it's interesting. But that point you made about just clicking is really the heart of what Aurate is doing, because it's about human chemistry. And the analogies that I've drawn in terms of the content is about the forerunner to chemistry, really. It's getting really down to basics of who we are and how we're wired, which is alchemy. And I use the word alchemy because it's kind of a mixture of science and art, of analysis and magic. And we just clicked, right? We just got along. Well, what is that?
People say all the time.
How do we decode it? How do we replicate it?
Right. Yeah.
How do we create chemistry?
What does it take to click?
Yeah. So that's the the actual first program that we're bringing to market is Communication Alchemy. And that is really looking at how we are, firstly showing up ourselves, how we understand more deeply, not just the body language, not just the words, but, how someone else is showing up. What are their concerns that they may not even be aware of themselves? I'm not getting into mind reading, but I'm certainly getting into just picking up on, more in the, the atmosphere.
Yes.
Of, what it is that's transpiring, that's actually occurring in the moment. And when we're more present, we connect more deeply.
Yeah.
So that's what Communication Alchemy is exploring, and asking people to go into inner work themselves, but in a really organized and structured way, and doing that at scale. And that's what's really not been done before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll share with you a story of a colleague of mine, and I won't name them, but back in the very, very early days of my sales career, we were almost, I think that was the goal, was to make us automatons. We all looked exactly the same. We had the same suits, the same haircuts, and we were driven to learn presentations by rote. Almost as you would do a times table, for those of you that can go back that far. And of course, it came across to customers that A, it wasn't very authentic, but also B, a lot of people struggled with it because it wasn't them. And of course, as we all know, if you're playing a role or playing a part or being something that you're not, you can only sustain it for a certain amount of time. And so in any B2B relationship, which is typically, a reasonably long period of time nowadays, customers will see the different yous. And of course, gradually the real you emerges almost like a butterfly from a chrysalis, in terms of, I now see the real seller. And that's where I think, you've got to try and get yourself to that point very early on if you can, because that's when customers will make a decision on whether or not they can trust you, whether or not they want to invest in a relationship with you, whether or not when they talk to other people, because of course they are more informed now than ever, you have a reputation that's envious. They've talked to other people who say, yeah, those guys are fantastic. You really need to work with them. That's difficult to ignore, and certainly more difficult to ignore than a fumbling cold call that's not well structured, to try and open up a sales campaign. So yeah, it's a key area of focus.
Well, so the point I was just going to add to that was, we all hate that death by PowerPoint thing, don't we? Right? Because you're, kind of doing to someone rather than having the conversation. But yeah, it's the humans have evolved some really clever senses, and that sixth sense of I can't put my finger on it, but I just know there's something weird about you or dodgy, right? And it's because there's something you're not telling them, or you're not able or willing or feeling safe yourself, so that you can be transparent or be more you. They smell a rat, they smell it, and they smell desperation too. But we all do, right? We pick up on something, and because we're not sure what it is, there is a lack of trust.
Yes, of course.
That undermines the relationship.
Yeah, we've seen practical examples of this. We now have sales teams that call themselves customer success. It has got, in certain parts of the world, such a bad reputation, they've had to change the name
of sales
to customer success. It's the same faces that used to be in sales, they've just got a different name. And that's got to be something that would, if you are a noble seller and you're proud to be in the profession that you're in, that's got to strike at the heart of your conscience, to say, why are we in this position that people have had to change our names? Because of what we did, previously in terms of how we behave. So yeah, I recognise that, and I'm all for it. And customers absolutely love it. If you show up, you're yourself, you're authentic, you're helpful. You do all the things that we say we should do, like you put the customer at the heart of everything you do. It's important to them, of course, and we've been a bit lax at doing that. I mean, I've seen situations where people will talk about following the customer's buying process. It's important that every customer buys in a different way. You should follow that buying process, but at the same time, trying to align themselves with their own internal selling process. And we know that those are two different processes, and there is only one that will surface as the reference, and so all of those things, those contradictory behaviors, the feeling that you're playing a role rather than being yourself, you're not being genuine, as you say, customers are smelling a rat or saying something about that company or that person, are all factors, and there's loads of data to prove this, isn't there? I mean, I think trust in CEOs now globally is at an all-time low, which is a terrible place for us to be, because as you say, selling is a noble art. We are helping people solve their problems. It should be a joyous occasion.
Yeah.
You've got a problem, I've helped you solve it, and we've made some money from doing that. What's not to like? We should both be ecstatic. and yet we're not, as a buyer, I don't want to take your phone calls. I screen them, I don't want to see you at a trade show or a conference. Well, I can't now because of COVID, but in those days, we didn't have an authentic relationship, and it's I think customers and also sellers, we are due this change, and the timing's perfect. And COVID for me has just accelerated that. So I think timing is perfect.
No, I think that is a really important point about why now, and because a lot of selling is happening remotely over Zoom or Teams or whatever tools you use. The ability to reach through the technology and connect more deeply and sooner is even more critical. So there's a lot of dynamics as to why now's the right time.
Yeah. To your point as well, not only have you got to show up and be much better because you're doing business remotely now, because it's very effective. You don't have to waste your time as we used to do on planes and trains and automobiles and hotels and all that stuff. But also, customers are also now much, much more credible because they've spent a lot more time researching what they need.
Yeah.
So that's another factor that, kind of impacts you as a seller remotely. You've got to be extra special. You've really got to be competent. And, is it any wonder that, 6 out of every 10 first meetings don't go anywhere because we're not where we should be and who we should be and behaving how we should behave,
And I think there is a very serious aspect of mental health as well. We've all been through a very stressful couple of years, and it was pretty bad before that, in terms of stress. And I put a lot of my health issues down to stress and not feeling like I could show up as myself. Part of that was my issue. Part of it was feeling that from others, and the fact that we want to create kind of the ability to normalize change, because if we don't change, we die, we stay stagnant, we go backwards in business, and we've got to evolve. And the thing is, how do you do that in a way that feels safe? And I think that definitely either heightens or reduces the stress.
Sure, and to that point, I mean, in selling, of course, there are many, many ways to measure success. Customer success being one of them. How do our customers feel about us? For me, it's one of the most important metrics. But as you know, as a seasoned seller, just as I am, the numbers also have been important. But going back before COVID, we knew, because we've seen data and studies that suggest that half of sales people in the B2B world are not hitting their number. And that's not a nice place to be as a seller in that old world. So again, to your point around mental health and feeling successful and being able to be successful, make yourself successful, find success. Yeah, I think again it's important, because once everybody's hitting the number or going through their quota, guess what? Everybody happy, including the sales leader. And they're some of the most difficult people in the world to please, in my experience. But yes, that's a good thing for mental health. But when half the people are not being successful, it can be a gloomy place to be, right?
Yeah. So I think this is, really just positioning, the why behind our business, and the problems we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And we really would like to have a conversation with you. If you're listening to this and you're liking what you hear, we want to solve that problem for you.
Sure we do. We want to take all that good stuff you've done with technology, all those methodologies, those frameworks, those processes that you've built into your sales activities, and we want to now enhance your pilots. We want to give them a simulator so that they can become expert pilots. And so when they leave the airfield, you don't have to worry about them, being successful. They're going to come back with all of the success that you wanted and more. So as Jack says, really love to have a conversation with you about it. Book a call. Let's talk about the future, because it's a bright future, Jack. It's a fantastic future with what we're going to be able to do together. Definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree. So if you want to know more and you're not ready to book a call, you can go onto our website. The links will be posted alongside this, and just find out a little bit more about us, and what we do. And, when you're ready, we'll be here.
Yes, we look forward to it. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Conrad.
It's been my pleasure, and I'm looking forward to so much more.
Yeah, me too. We'll talk again soon.
Take care, everyone. Bye now.